This is a little different than my normal Cypher basic style videos because this isn't really about the Cypher system at all. This is actually about using the Cypher system in the Foundry virtual tabletop, which is what I normally use. And I've been asked by both a fan of the channel who she really wanted a thing about the character sheets, as well as several other people actually that also wanted sort of like a brief breakdown of how the character sheets work. So, let's get into it, shall we? First, let's do an overview of like the main stats area. In the upper left, we have your picture. Now, I don't normally suggest a lot of mods for your basic setup. You don't need to go full bells and whistles like I do. You can pretty much run it out of the box and you're good. However, one I do kind of suggest sometimes is Tokenizer, because then you can just click on the picture and you can like upload your own pictures, resize them, put like borders for the tokens around them and stuff like that. Makes the process very streamlined and easy. You can do everything in Cypher. So that is one mod I suggest. So making the pictures area kind of important if you have that mod installed. Here is where your descriptive sentence is, starting with your name. You have the boxes for your descriptor, type, focus, things like this. There may also be, depending on your settings, a fourth box here that you could use for flavors, a second descriptor for racial descriptors, or whatever you need it for, basically. On the right, you have your current tier, your maximum effort score, and your current experience points as well. Underneath that, you have your advancement options. You can check them off as you take them. Of course, as you know, you take so many of them and then you can increase your tier. There's a little reset button there if you want to uncheck them all. It's not something I would see used too often, but hey, you know, nice little extra feature. Then we have the 3 pool areas for might, speed, and intellect. You'll have your minimum and maximum values. There's a little D20 roll icon if you want to actually like roll the pools themselves. You've got little buttons for plus, minus, reset, and everything if you want to adjust them with the buttons instead of typing the numbers in. And of course, you have a little box for your edge score in each value that you may want to put in, because then Foundry will mathematically calculate everything for you properly. Now, before we get into the rest of the sheet, I actually wanted to cover the settings of the sheet first, even though it's like the last tab, because the settings of your sheet can really adjust what your sheet is going to look like, because as is true with any campaign within Cypher, there's a lot of dials and knobs that the group may be adjusting for their particular campaign. So let's get into the settings first, shall we? First is the game mode. 99% of your games are probably going to be set to the Cypher system. The only other game modes they have currently are Unmasked and the Strange, because they have some special things to them. If you set it to Unmasked, you get your teen and mask, and then if you set it to the Strange, it automatically sets it up so that you can set up translations as you go to the I'm not going to explain it. If you know the Strange, great. If not, you go read the book. Go get the book The Strange. Next is setting up the 4th pool and its name. You can activate or deactivate this and name it for whatever you're going to use it for. Then there's activation for the tags tab. That is something I think needs its own video. I know I keep saying I'm going to do a video on the tags tab, and I have used the tags tab. I'm actually using it in my current Sunday game for the one guy that has multiple transformations. It's very useful, not just for the Strange, but for many uses actually, where there'd be like circumstantial changes to your character, and you don't want to go as deep as to use Farling's active effects mod, which is also super awesome. The tags tab, you can leave this one alone for the majority of games unless you want to get super fancy with it. It allows you to just sort of like automate some things in the sheet. Now, you have the option to archive things in your sheet normally. When you archive them, it just kind of grays them out. Well, there's a checkbox here that when you archive them, they disappear instead. Now, unless you're using tags to archive and unarchive things to transform, you probably don't really actually want to hide them. If you're not using those, you actually might want to keep it so that they're not hidden. This way you could like use a Cypher, for example, and just archive it. It'll gray it out and you still have it there for reference, but it doesn't actually get rid of it. However, if you're using the tags and you're doing it for transformations and stuff, and you have like a billion abilities on your character sheet as a result, then yeah, you may want to have this checked to hide things that are archived. Next is the skills, abilities, and equipment, like doing custom categories in them. You'll find these in the appropriate sections. You can name the categories whatever you wish. And then there's a checkbox that you can do to hide categories that don't actually have anything in them. If you've got the category set up, you probably don't want to hide it, but you could. And of course, you can shift things from categories by drag and drop or in the settings of each individual, like ability, equipment, whatever. Custom sheet design is here for a couple of things, just to customize the color of the sheet. If there's a logo, what the logo is, things like this. From the look of it here, I obviously have a like special dark mode mod, which I have posted on the Cypher Unlimited Discord in the VTT section if you want to use it as well. I don't use this myself, but if you don't use it, it is very handy to have this section so you can actually customize it how you want. You can even put your own custom images in for the entire sheet and everything. And then like with the other things for skills, because you can create your own categories, you can set them up to sort by rating, and you can even add a section for power shifts, because this is where power shifts were put on the character sheet. If you use them not only for superheroes, but if you're doing the thing from like Stay Alive for vampires, it's called blood shifts or anything like that. You can rename it as you need. Then you get to things, some combat things like the number of recovery rolls, or like when they happen. Like you could like change, there's certain foci that may change your 10-minute recovery roll to like a 1-minute recovery roll, or even give you extra 1-minute recovery rolls. You can do all of that stuff right in here. You can also enable or disable lasting/permanent damages. This is something not all groups or even a lot of groups use. I tend to use it for like injuries and conditions and things like this, but you won't see a lot of groups probably use this section. Then we've got the checkboxes for enabling or disabling things like the Cypher's artifacts, oddities, crafting materials, and of course you can rename the things as well in case you're using them for something else. Like a lot of times crafting materials I'll rename as like resources or something like that and use them for a slightly different purpose. So you can basically, as usual, customize anything on the sheet that you could want, and you can repurpose it, which is super great. So before we get into the other tabs, I want to go over the all-in-one task roll box. In Cypher, everything basically boils down to a task roll, right? Like everything is the same type of roll, whether it's an ability or a skill or using a piece of equipment or anything. It's basically the same type of roll, even if it looks like it's in a different category. So we're going to go over very quickly the task roll box and just show you what is in there. When you roll one of the little like D20 icons found throughout the sheet, whether it's like beside your pool or beside a skill or an ability or anything like that, by default just rolls it, unless your settings are set otherwise, in which case it brings up this task roll box. If your settings are not set up to bring that up by default, then you got to hold the Alt key when clicking it for the task roll box to appear. Old Gus, myself, and a lot of people that use Foundry Virtual Tabletop actually do have the roll box up by default so that you don't have to press the Alt key, just because it's not uncommon for a lot of your task rolls to have circumstantial assets or applying effort or things like this more often than just a straight up roll. The all-in-one task window looks daunting at first until you realize that it's just breaking down the things that you would normally get within a check. The right hand side is just giving you a readout of any easements or hindrances you're getting, how many levels of effort you're spending. It'll even give you a warning if you're trying to spend too many levels of effort so that you're going past your effort score. And then it'll tell you a rough value of like where your pools are going to be after the roll. It's just sort of a readout, which is super nice. You could effectively ignore that half of the window if you wanted. On the left half, everything you could set up in a task roll. Do you want assets? Set the assets. Do you want to ease it? The ease is down here. Do you want to apply effort for different things? There's effort for easing the task there. There's effort for applying damage there. Effort for other uses. Anything you could put it there, including what pool it's being based off of. If you know the difficulty, you can put it in here. Basically anything in the roll is on the left-hand side. Just take a moment to go through it, and if you even know the basics of the system, you'll see where everything is. When you click roll, it will pay and roll. So if you have like effort or anything like that, or an upfront cost, like if you're like trying to like push something really heavy and the GM's like, that's going to cost you 2 extra might, this will roll and pay for you. Or if you are, say, using physical dice and you just are using this to keep the math straight, you could just click pay and it'll auto-calculate it on your sheet for deducting the points without actually rolling anything for you. Then you could roll the physical dice as you need. Skills and abilities work very largely the same, so I'm just going to lump them in together here. Have all the same types of settings, and whether they're trained, you can even set them up to do damage if you really wanted to. You've got the settings in things like skills and abilities that would be the same checks and balances that you could set up in the role window. You can just pre-set it up to do it, so it auto-applies an asset, or automatically eases it by 1, or hinders it by 2, or whatever your setup is for those things. In the top of skills, you can actually set the training right there. In abilities, you would actually have to set it in the settings in the side there. There's one major difference in the settings for the abilities, and that is near the bottom. There are 3 boxes to turn that ability into a skill, attack, or armor. Combat tab is pretty straightforward. We start off with the status track. Your status, of course, determines if there's any modifiers or anything. The sheet will auto-calculate certain things, like not pinging you for getting like a major effect if you're too far down the status track and stuff like that. Just setting it here, it will also give a little readout on the right-hand side to tell you, hey, you're debilitated, this is what this means, and it will actually show you the rule for it right in the character sheet, so you don't have to look it up, which is super nice. Past that is the recovery rolls. It is here that you can set the value of your recovery rolls, so like D6 plus whatever it is. And there's the checkboxes. If you want to roll them manually, you can click the checkboxes yourself, or you can click the little D20 icon. It'll check one of the boxes for you, so don't double check the box, and then roll it for you in the rolling window. You get the number of points. Now, of course, it can't auto assign the points for you because you need to split them up in whichever manner you want. So that can't really be automated. But it'll at least roll it for you, and you know how many points you have to split between wherever you want to put them. And of course, there's the reset button to set them all, so you're getting ready to go again. After that are your attacks and armor. These are pretty straightforward. Well, your attacks work very much like the skills or abilities. Some of the options are set right in the top of the attack rather than having to go into the actual like settings for it, such as its damage, if it's like a light, medium, heavy weapon, or maybe from a special ability or something. Is it automatically eased? And some notes about it as well, which is super handy if you want to just put that in the tops of the weapons. Armor. You can set the armor depending on the check beside it so that it is active or inactive. This is really handy for a couple of reasons. If you, for example, have multiple sets of armor, maybe you only want to, you can only have one at a time active. So you'll check the appropriate one and uncheck the others. Or if you have circumstantial resistances, for example, like say you have Shepherd's Demons and you go into your demon form and you have 2 armor only against extra cold or fire damage, then you could have it in the background, just keep it inactive so it's not adding to your armor total, and you know to reference it if you get hit with fire or cold that way and be like, oh, I've got 2 cold armor, then yeah, that type of thing. Depending on their settings, there may be sections within the combat area for ammunition and lasting or permanent damages. These are circumstantial depending on the setup that your GM has created for your campaign. Ammunition, if you're using like my Cypher Foundation book, maybe doing it as a depletion check instead of actually tracking ammunition. Or they may be tracking ammunition. Maybe 12 arrows means 12 arrows. So you're going to have to double check with your GM about that. Lasting permanent damages is not something I've seen too many other groups use. I use it a lot for like injuries and conditions and everything, but it's not something you're probably going to see a lot of GMs use. The lasting permanent damages are really nice because you set the pool that they're tied to, might, speed, or intellect, and a number. And what the number will do is it will limit the maximum amount that your current value of that pool could go to. For example, say you have a might of 12, and you take a lasting damage of 2 for your might pool because you've sprained your back or something, like you hurt your back. Oh, my sciatica. This means that when you restore your might pool, even though the maximum value still says 12, if you click the little like restore button to reset your might pool, you'll notice it'll only go to 10 because of the 2 points you have in the lasting or permanent values. Once again, this is not something you'll see very often, but it's a really neat little thing that you could probably tinker around with and find more uses for. I know I do. The equipment section doesn't really have anything for you to roll. You can have your equipment here, ciphers, artifacts, and then of course like other categories that you may or may not rename for like materials, oddities, and you can even make some new categories within the actual like equipment section of the equipment tab. So there's a lot of organization you can have here if need be. The only thing that's close to an actual role you're going to see in the equipment is if there's a depletion value for your artifacts, it will give you a nice little button right beside the artifact, assuming it's set up properly, that you can click and see if you've rolled the depletion in the chat or not. And finally, the various text areas, there's a notes and description tab that you'll see as a player that you can put your notes and descriptions into. And if you're the GM, there's also another tab here that's just like the GM notes tab that the players will not see in case you want super secret notes about that particular player or something. And that's about it. That is a really brief TLDR rundown, or at least as brief as I can make it, about the character sheets within the Foundry Virtual Tabletop. I can't really think of anything else that we need to talk about that is a major point. Basically, what I suggest is if you've got time before a game, explore the character sheet a little bit. Just like peruse what a few of the settings are, and especially review that all-in-one task rolling window, because that can be, you're going to be seeing that probably a lot. So you're going to want to review it and just to see where everything is. It's super handy that way. And that's about all I got. I will do a separate video on tags because once again, they can be very handy, but it's very circumstantial when you use them. And not everyone is comfortable monkeying around with them for some reason, but they're actually way simpler to use than you'd think. All right. Well, that's it. If you like what I do, don't forget to give a like and subscribe. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a good one, eh?